I want to tell you a story about a time in history that is not often talked about or written about. And that was just after the turn of the 20th century, the end of the Gilded Age, the beginning of the Progressive Age. There were swarms of immigrants pouring into the USA. Industry, factories were booming. It was on its way to becoming the foremost nation in the world, but it wasn't quite there yet. The infrastructure was being laid for that. And at that time, a handful of men basically controlled the country. And I'm not talking about the government or the treasury. I'm talking about railroad tycoons, factory owners, and industrialists, many of whom gathered at the New York Yacht Club on 44th Street in Manhattan. They had a magnificent clubhouse that, if you see it from the street, it looks like the stern of a Dutch galleon. And inside, incredible, a model room that is wall to wall hulls of their yachts. And these guys who were millionaires, they didn't want to pay any income tax. One of the reasons there are all those huge mansions in Newport, Rhode Island, is Rhode Island was the last state to have an income tax. So it was like a sort of tax refuge for those guys to build a big mansion there that they would live in the summer. And I got really interested in the characters, in some of these characters. People like Hamilton Twombly, who made a fortune with the Union Sulphur Company, and Charles Schwab, the Charles Schwab, who was a brilliant businessman and industrialist. The Vanderbilts themselves were fascinating. Harold Vanderbilt, son of Cornelius, his sister married the Duke of Marlborough, went off to live in Blenheim Palace and became a princess. Didn't really want to be a railroad tycoon. He was just into sailing, and he was the real thing. He was an absolutely brilliant sailor. I got fascinated with these characters. Some of them probably very dark. You know, if you read their bios, they're sort of whitewashed and they sound like they were philanthropists and they gave a children's hospital and they gave a library to Yale University and stuff. But you know, there was a seamy underbelly underneath all of that. I got interested in the scandals behind the lives of these plutocrats and billionaire sailors. And the time there between the turn of the century and World War I was an amazing time in America. The suffragettes were starting to make themselves heard. Then there was the Ludlow massacre. The Rockefellers basically hired a private militia to go in and harass them, and dozens of workers were killed over a dispute about hours and conditions. There was the Triangle Shirt Factory file, when women were burnt alive because they were working in crowded conditions in a factory in New York. Unions were not yet a big thing, so the Wobblies, for example, were sort of viewed as this undercurrent of revolution. And some of the big guys wanted to push back on that, fight back against the unions. Probably sounds a little bit familiar if you follow some of the big companies around today. Meanwhile, at the New York Yacht Club, their favorite pastime was big yacht racing. And they owned the largest sailing yachts that the world had ever seen. They tried to outdo each other by each commissioning a bigger, more fancy sailing yacht. And then the actual races themselves took place on the harbor in New York, under the Statue of Liberty, Battery Park, Ellis Island. And it was a huge spectator event. So the water would be dotted with large and small boats, big steam spectator boats selling tickets, little rowboats, little motorboats, canoes, whatever it took. Everybody was out on the water, and it was like this massive party. I mean, there were galas, there were fireworks. Now, the owners themselves didn't all actually sail. Some of them were on their steam yacht watching like a racehorse owner watches from the stands, right? Some of them were actually sailors, and a handful of them were very, very good sailors, very good skippers, very good strategists, and so on. And they would work very closely with the yacht designers like Nate Herreshoff. And the yachts just kept getting bigger and faster, and the stakes that were bet on this were bigger and bigger. It was the biggest betting sport in the USA, more than boxing, more than horse racing. Thousands were wagered on these races. These yachts, the downside of them, apart from the cost, was that it took 35 or 40 men to race them. And these couldn't be other New York Yacht Club members with their soft hands. It had to be hardy, weather-beaten Maine lobstermen. That's where they got their crews from. Their hands were already leathery. They didn't feel the cold. They worked together well as a team. In a bad season for fishing or lobstering, they really needed the money. And at night, they would lie in their hammocks and read their Bibles because they were churchmen instead of going out in the town and getting drunk. So if you're a New York Yacht Club millionaire and you've got this big yacht that requires 35 guys to sail it, you would send up to Maine fishing ports and you would recruit your crews there. When I was a kid, my granny had this gorgeous coffee table book in black and white by Beacon of Cows, who is a photographer. I used to open this book and gaze in amazement at the size of these things and the beauty of them, and those tiny little dots along the rail that were actually men. It was just inconceivable. I mean, who were they? And that was what really gave me the idea, well, maybe I could actually work some of these characters into a novel. And I thought about it. I thought, well, what is it that really fascinates me about this era? I think it was the division of the extreme wealth and the extreme poverty, which is nothing new, you know, and it hasn't gone away still, but it was really amplified round about that period. And the New York Yacht Club sort of said it all. It was an absolute expression of complete wealth and power. And yet the guys that were working for them, sailing their boats for them, had nothing. They were penniless Maine fishermen. And I thought about this. I thought, I really want to tell this story. I do think in fictional terms. I think the lyrics of my songs are very like fiction. Some of the music videos I made are like mini movies and so on. So I think I have the sort of creative mind of a writer, but I'd never had a go at it. I love things that I've never had a go at. You know, where there's like a new skill that I have to learn and I'm going to have to get good at it because I hate being bad at things. And I'm at heart, I'm a real show off. So I'm not going to put anything out there until I get good at it. But I love the process of learning and figuring out how to do something well when I really don't have a clue. And so I came up with the idea of writing a novel about all of this. And I think you ought to check it out. It's called Prevailing Wind. Thank you for watching.